Broadcasting live from the World Wide Web, delivering the news 24/7 and the best Filipino entertainment in an online television. Blockbuster movies, great shows, music videos, and more. Serving the Filipino community in Northern America and the rest of the world. This is MCBN.TV, connecting our world.
How does the second generation Filipino Canadian youth thrive today? I was actually curious about this. Are we putting a lot of pressure for youth that they need to be future leaders? Do they know how to be a leader? Or we're just like asking them to be a leader, but they don't even know who they are and what they wanted to be in the future. So today we'll be joined by Chalin Lazerna, and he's a chef. I wanted to know what actually he's baking and cooking. Hopefully we'll get that later. Also, we have the director of Folklorico, Michael Duroja, and he's actually using the platform of performing arts to advocate about youth, about their skills, and equipping them with what can they be prepared for the future. So stay tuned and stay connected.
AS Season Tickets, your trusted Filipino travel experts. We offer daily hot deals, 24/7 customer support, Tagalog-speaking agents. Seats are unlimited. AS Season Tickets, the only travel agency you need.
For the first time ever on Toronto stage, she crowned media in association with Stadium Estates and MCBN Media Group Incorporated. Black Diamond Event Management brings the event Diva to Diva. It's a clash of world-class Pinoy talents that guide us back to back with the Queens of Demand. Cool Ledesma, Shasha Padilla, Mitchell Lopez, Nanette Pintor, an evening of laughter and songs of HHB's voices and a fun move and punchline. It's a showdown for Christmas. Diva to Diva, September 22nd at the Toronto Pavilion. This program is brought to you by Action Honda, where car ownership is made easy.
Okay, and I actually introduced that about second generation Filipino Canadian. It's as if like we're putting a lot of pressure to the youth. I think it's not only second generation, right? It's like the youth itself. Like we're putting a lot of pressure, like, you know, you need to get ready for the future.
I think the question is who is putting who is putting that pressure on the youth today?
Yeah.
Is it the parents? And if it's the parents, where are those parents coming from? Are
Yeah.
they how did they come here? Are they themselves first generation, or are they or were they born here? Were they coming? Were they immigrating here? And if so, what context are they coming in here? I think that those are factors that come into play when it comes to the way you position it of youth being pressured these days to be successful, or
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. I think because that we're saying that we want to prepare them for the future because there are our leaders for the future. Are they making a dent in this universe? Like it's so big, and it's almost like we just want them to be youth. Like be adventurous, making mistakes, and do whatever you want. Like you being a chef. Did you choose being a chef? Like, or this is something that like your parents told you like this is where you should be.
I've always felt that like the best way to preserve one's culture is through its food. It's also the best way to learn about another culture is through their food. So as long as the youth keeps on eating adobo and kare kare,
Yeah.
and shout out to kare kare lovers.
Yeah.
Like you don't need to in a way speak the language, dance the dances, do the plays, as long as like you know what your food is and the food of your forebears, because like that's the way that you can introduce your culture to other people, and then it's a gateway. So then you can open it up. Hey, here's our traditional dance. Hey, here's our traditional clothes. Hey, this is our language is called Tagalog. Right? So
Well, we were talking about the second generation. These are the children or the youth born here.
By the way, good coffee.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, it says your cappuccino, so hopefully you have the latte, the cappuccino.
I like the,
Yeah.
the citrusy flavors of this.
It's got a hint of mandarin or
There you go.
Calamansi.
calamansi.
Yeah, you're chef, so you probably know about
Could be
that.
calamansi.
Yeah, like the taste, right? It's like Filipinos always have a taste or a thirst for something.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I think I was kind of like more curious, and the inverse also for me is like, we're all keep on saying like, they're the future leaders, but when you're engaged with them, they're just involved to what's happening now. So you're right by saying like, who's pressuring? It's the parents, or is it the community? I think it's more about the community because we have a generation that, the oldies, like so active, and I hear often now that, we're going away soon. Like, are the generation after us, are they prepared? It's almost like there's a disconnect. I feel there's always a disconnect. Like it's like we're saying that's a youth, like be youth, like be young and adventurous, make mistakes, like so many choices.
I can agree with that sense because I grew up here. So I came here when I was 9. I grew up here until I was 20. That's when I also left my family, and I've been away for 16 years. And it's easy to look back and say why did that happen? And for me, it's much easier to verbalize and say that I left for those 16 years because I did not want to follow the Filipino Canadian schedule Canadian schedule because living in a city of Toronto, being a Filipino, being a Canadian, you're put into this timeline of you gotta do this if you're not studying, okay, and then now you have to get married at a certain age.
Yes, I know that. Yeah.
And I think the beauty about being away for 16 years and being in countries where I was only the minority, and also keeping in mind that like I've always had the only connection I've had with my Filipino culture during these times was always the folk
What's a
dance.
choice? It was a choice for you.
It was my choice. At the same time, it was also it was supported by my parents, right? Because I was a student then, so it requires financial support from them. It also requires their support because they were, they never pressured me to become a doctor or an engineer. But then I had my own dreams as well, or my goals. At that time, I just felt that that I need to step away. I didn't plan to be away for 16 years. Just planned to be away for 6 months. Well, 6 months led to one thing and to another, and then here I am. I came back 2 years ago, 16 years later, and for just to summarize, is that I during that time I was able to really focus on what it means to be Filipino, what it means to be Canadian.
Kind of like later on, so that's what I'm saying. The
How do I
disconnect is
define
like,
that? Yeah.
well, yeah, that's right. That like being you, like we're talking about, like I think I heard in it's 18 to 35, like around that age, 25 to after. It's like you're beyond to what you're thinking already. Below that is almost like this is it. Like you're not gonna know. I think in my perspective that you're not gonna think about the future when you're at that age.
No.
It's almost like it's okay.
Yeah.
But after that, like the that generation, even for me, well, I'm I'd admit that I was kind of like thinking like they should be already thinking about their career choices, or they should be involved in the community. And thinking back, like I wasn't like that. So how, like, I almost gonna be asking that, should we connect that or let it be?
I think as Canadians, we should let it be,
Yeah.
because Canada allows us to be. Because Canada, really, what is Canadian identity, right? There is no, like, you can't pinpoint one thing that's truly Canadian. Like, I know you can say A and, oh yeah, the cold, but then, come on,
Yeah.
those are very superficial.
Yeah.
But like, beavers. But like the Americans, they have their identity. They're so patriotic, blah, blah, blah. But Canada, we're like the laid back brother. We're like, it's okay to be whatever you want. Now,
Because we're so many immigrants.
Yes.
I mean, we're saturated already.
And our charter rights allows us to do that too. So yeah, like I agree. We can choose our path and without a lot
with
of
no penalty.
Yeah.
In the States, if you're too what your culture is, it becomes un-American because you haven't submitted to the American values, the American dream, American way.
And that's a true melting pot way of
See,
immigration.
And I have a problem with that word melting pot, because that means you melt it together to form one. Whereas I love, I forgot who said it, but Canada isn't a melting pot. It's more of a mosaic.
Yes.
Right? Where little patches become one great
I like
big
that.
quilt.
Yeah.
Yes.
You don't
Yeah.
have to be Canadian. You don't have
Yeah.
to be this. Like, you're allowed to be your little patch, your little niche. Whereas Americans, now
You need to be American, and so there's totally, now you're telling me
I'm not
that
being anti-American. I'm just
you're
being
still
real.
allowed to go to US
Yes,
after this.
absolutely.
we can be anti-American government.
Yes, we have other views on that. But
So-
again, this is keep real, right?
Yeah, we're getting real.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
right.
so-
So Filipino American would say will be totally different from Filipino Canadian. Even we're saying they're all Filipinos coming from one culture, influenced by one culture. It's because of the environment. Probably we're talking about a different youth if we were talking about this in the Philippines. Now we're here because of the environment. Then it becomes a different conversation.
It's a different conversation. At the same time, it's odd because when I was growing up here in the 90s, we're disconnected from Philippines. There's no social media. There's no nothing.
TFC yet.
Not unlike
No
today.
TFC,
It's so
no
accessible.
nothing, right?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
then nowadays, for instance, there's Filipinos that are also doing Kiki challenges
Yeah.
at the same time as here, but but what's great about them being back home is that they can still speak the language, they still know their culture. Whereas here, one of the things that I started observing for Filipinos is that yes, like one of the things that affects me sometimes, especially with my friends that were born here, is that at the end of the day they'll be like, yeah, but I'm still very Canadian.
So, like,
your parents
yeah.
just immigrated.
Yeah.
It's only one generation ago, and for you to say that's one. I think that's for lack of a better term, that's depressing to hear because our culture is so rich, and not just with food. Now, like the food gastronomy, that's the next best thing at the moment, right?
Yeah.
I think it comes in waves. So perhaps right now we're in the gastronomy, and hopefully in the next 2 or 3 years it'll be more performing arts because we have our many people here Hatao, Fly Lady Die,
Mm-hmm.
really already they were born here, but at the same time now they're so well established in their craft that they're able to look back into the Filipino culture and then get more inspiration. So I think those artists right now they inspire me because they start looking in further, and the more they look, the further they get. They go deeper. I don't know if you've heard of that. I wasn't able to go to that show. Fly Lady I had her. She had like a summer performance, like a 3-day performance. It was packed, but I think wasn't sure who's the cast there, but at the same time, just knowing of where that piece is coming from as a Filipino Canadian growing up here, and then connecting it back to culture. I think it's a beautiful thing. And then now what we went to high school together, so now she's maybe in her late 30s. So there's no set time, and that's what makes me feel optimistic that okay, maybe we're not able to reach out to kids, to the youth for folk dance at this moment. However, perhaps in 10 years, it's never too late.
They would have kind of like an inspiration. I think we're going to go back and stay connected with us. If you have comments or other perspective, I wanted to know actually, what is the Filipino-Canadian identity for the perspective of the youth? I have my own, but what's yours? So stay tuned and stay connected.
Initiate transmission now.
MCBN TV. It all starts with PinoyRadio.com, trailed by Crosswave Radio. Now comes a new kind of entertainment that connects us all. From our motherland, the Philippines, to the land you chose to migrate, the world we knew then and the world we know now. Streaming live 24/7 anywhere on earth. Para sa ito, kabayan, this is MCBN TV, connecting our world.
AS Favorite Tickets, your trusted Filipino travel experts. We offer daily hot deals, 24/7 customer support, Tagalog-speaking agents. Seats are limited. AS Favorite Tickets, the only travel agency you need.
There's only one radio station in Canada that plays pure Filipino music.
Gagawin ko ang lahat para makapiling ka. Sa lahat ng babae, sa'yo lang magagawin ko.
We are North America's #1 Filipino radio. Pinoy Radio. I love Filipino music.
I'm actually checking on my phone. Sorry. I was trying to check whether you guys are watching and trying to connect with us or have questions. Before the commercial, I got these two guests suddenly. But because we're talking about what is the Filipino-Canadian identity. And we talk about divide. We're talking about And here I go. I said, like, well, it's different Filipino Canadian when you say that they came here. So they're not Filipino Canadian. Born here, they're Filipino Canadian. And put it in the mix that, like my children, who's actually biracial, like, because they're Canadian and Filipino, but a mixed culture. So what is the Filipino identity then?
Wow. Uh, wow.
What is wow? Like what? I think what
that
is
was a response.
It's gonna be like 5 minutes of
like okay, what is difficult? Why is it difficult to answer
I-
that?
I have a different route of answering.
Yes.
So when I went to Philippines last year, I did a research trip. At the same time, I would meet with directors of other Filipino folk dance groups in Manila and Davao. But there's one particular character. His name is Ed Lapis, Kuya Ed or Pastor Ed.
pencil.
Lapis,
Yeah, pencil.
with
Oh,
with a Z at the end.
Oh.
He's a well-known author. He's a pastor.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, he started a Filipino folk dance group in '95 under the church. But I'll tell you another story for that in terms of why he did that. But I asked him a question that was affecting me. I asked him, like, so how does a Filipino folk dance group based in Toronto, like the one that I'm representing, how can we? What's our purpose? Because I see that our population is exponentially increasing, but yet I also see that the interest or the appetite for Filipino traditions, culture, dance. I'm not going to talk about gastronomy, but just in the arts side,
Yeah.
it feels like it's declining. Why is that? And so one thing that he mentioned was he said, "Don't worry about so much about the people that are immigrating, because when you immigrate, you are in survival mode. You want to adapt." And also, if they came to Canada or wherever they were going to the diaspora, if they didn't have anything to share about their culture through dance or gastronomy, then they have nothing to share to anyone here. The people that you need to focus on are the second generation Canadians, he says, whether they're mixed or pure, is because they're the ones that are gonna be seeking identity.
Yeah.
Will discover
Yeah.
will be interested in discovering their origins or their roots.
So seeking means that I have every intention to know what my Filipino heritage, or seeking means that I want to belong because like I don't have a choice that I'm a Filipino. So I need to belong somewhere that I
Yes.
can't be Canadian, I
They
can't
need
be
to
Filipino.
they need to identify.
Then I need to be Filipino. But it's almost like there's no
Especially-
choice, kind of like, well, I'm a Filipino and might as well.
It starts off with gastronomy. I think
Yeah.
that's where there's no pressure, right? Because in the beginning, no one wants to speak, or the parents probably don't want to teach them Tagalog or Ilocano.
Well, hold it.
or-
Well, that's what happened to you. Like the intention for your parents is for you to adapt. So they didn't teach you Tagalog.
Yes. Oh,
so
I was
right.
telling you a story how like I remember when I was a kid before we emigrated here.
Yes.
I wasn't taught or allowed to speak Tagalog
Even back home.
back home.
Yes.
Because they were waiting to get their visa to come here. Blah blah blah.
Got it.
So I wasn't even allowed to. So there were two choices to watch when you were a kid back then. So it's either Batibot
Yeah.
or Sesame Street.
Oh, there you go.
I was not allowed to watch Batibot.
Batibot.
Because
Oh my God.
my parents wanted me and my sisters to be fluent in English when we came here, so that when you're in grade one, the kids won't make fun of you, and it'll be an easier transition.
It's almost there's a shame of it. That's another conversation.
It's like what you're
That's,
saying. It's
Yeah. Yes.
Because that's also the divide in Manila as well. That's another conversation
Oh,
too. And that's another layer of
In Manila, like when-
Manila imperialism.
Yeah.
Why Tagalog is one. Why Tagalog was chosen over Cebuano. The other one is speaking English versus Tagalog because of hierarchy, or
Wow.
whether it's going because they were under the excuse of, yes, we're going because we're moving to Canada. For me, I was 9, so I didn't feel like I knew how to speak both English and Tagalog already coming in. My parents never told me to speak neither, or to choose between the two. I totally remember my first day in school in St. Lawrence or Precious Blood, and not thinking whether I had an accent or not, and yes, except for maybe nowadays I think I have more accent now because I speak other languages. But before,
We're choosing to be like, and to, it's more like a really
but
a
that
choice.
time,
Like,
yeah, like no one ever made fun of my accent
yeah.
at any point in time except for my Filipino friends.
There you go. Because they can relate.
Because they can hear me speak Tagalog and they
Yes.
know that I was the only person that speaks
Can,
Tagalog to anyone that wants to their parents, for instance.
Yeah.
Hi tita, hi tito, kamusta? And they're like, why are you speaking to my parents in Tagalog? Like, because I can.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think they'll appreciate it. That was my point of view at the time.
For me, like it's when I'm at home, like with my parents, I don't speak to them in Tagalog.
Yeah.
Like even everybody else speak Tagalog to friends, coworkers, whatever. But when it comes to them, it feels weird.
Because you were told not to speak Tagalog,
Yeah,
and it's kind of like
In a way, it's also like calling your tito or tita by their first name.
Yes.
Like it's because it's so ingrained in you now. Like it's just weird.
Yeah, it's just one of those real thoughts that okay, you don't.
Right?
do that.
Yeah.
That's true. That's
So
true.
I don't know. That was I came up with. Did it help in a way, I guess. But then later on in life, I was
You get it
playing
back.
catch up with everybody else in the community because everybody else was fluent in Tagalog, where I had to relearn it, even though I understood it. But there were a lot of things that I couldn't understand, and I did it because of we have a restaurant, and when you're doing a Filipino restaurant, it's very beneficial to be bilingual. Right?
Can I buy? Pwede bang mag-order
Yes,
ng adobo?
and-
It's kind of like, what? Nah,
If you-
not talking to you now.
Exactly. If you keep on having your customer repeat
Yeah.
themselves, they're gonna get frustrated. You're gonna lose the sale.
Yeah.
So, okay, I am going to learn Tagalog, and ngayon nakaka-Tagalog na ako, and then I'm in MCBN and
Yes.
doing all this stuff. Right?
Yes.
Right. But I've always felt that I have to be two different people, with Filipino Canadians and with the Filipino community.
In what way? And
Um,
how so?
Okay, so I do hosting and stuff
Yes.
too, right? So comedy on both sides is totally different. I don't get like the very Filipino comedy stuff because
It's like the new ones. It's
very
different.
slapstick
Yeah.
and stuff.
Yeah.
And then but then I have to adapt to that type of hosting. Whereas where I'm doing something like this or like for YouTube and stuff, then I get to be more myself.
Right.
But I have to play a character.
Yeah.
Is it because it depends on your audience more?
It depends on the
than-
audience, but it's also like I think like we mentioned in the break about how there is kind of like a divide between
Got it.
I don't know if it's a proper term, but like fobs and cakers. What do they call?
Okay, what are those? I think too old to understand that.
I just know the words, but
So anyone that, for instance, so in Vaughan before when I was in high school, when we do like inter high school traveling just to visit.
Are those derogatory kind of,
It's
or
not really
stereotyping?
like bacon.
No, it's just
and,
Is that okay?
yeah.
It's Filipinos that grew up with non-Filipinos basically.
Yeah.
Right? And for me, I had those two phases. My first phase, my first group of friends were only Filipinos, and I'm like, I live in Canada, so how come I don't have any non-Filipino friends? And then when I moved to the other side of Markham, that's when everything started. Like didn't have any more Filipino friends, and I went to university, rarely any Filipino friends, and I moved to Sweden, no Filipino friends. Brazil, no Filipino friends. Mexico, maybe one or two Filipino friends. So,
Are you missing it, or
no,
because
not at all.
Okay.
I think if anything, it's more like this. I didn't want to be part of that divide. Like
Yeah.
because I think looking back, I questioned it too much because, as you said,
Mm-hmm.
I have to be two different people. Whereas when I'm international, I can just be myself. And then coming back here,
Without it's like going back to that pressure, without pressure that you need to be Filipino, you need to be a little bit of Canadian, and a little bit of this. Like you're right. Like it's almost like you're kind of like imprisoned to that kind of like thinking
But
The
without.
pressure comes
it's
from
a
here.
pressure too,
Ah.
and it's survivor mode.
Yeah.
Survivor mode, like
Yeah.
you're saying. It's
Yeah.
like you have to adapt to whoever's in front
Adapt or
of you.
die, right?
Adapt and die.
If you want to be, if you still want to be relevant, you have to adapt to the environment and all that.
It goes
stuff.
with business as well, whether
Exactly.
it's a restaurant. Even for us as a 44-year-old group, 2 years ago when I decided to take up the managing director role uh, to create a new roadmap of where folkloric was going to be in 5 to 10 years, that was the question too. Do you want to do the exact same thing, and that means it's going to be a 44-year-old startup forever, 44 years and counting, because everything was done katuan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or do we organize and do this properly and start having crafting a message that is that's always been there, but it's just never crafted that way. So when I say yes, Folklorico Filipino Canada has been developing culture ambassadors, leaders since 1974, we have been, except that we never really realized it because in our minds we're just dancing for the crowd. But really, what we're doing is that every single time that we take our craft and we go to a international folk festival, we represent Philippines. Even this past summer when we went to Mexico, and of course I lived there. It was great. I was able to direct the group in Spanish and everything. But what was more like heartfelt there was we were really feeling more Pinoy than ever, even for me, especially like Mexico and Philippines. We shared 500 years of colonization and of commercial trade. So there's Filipino blood in Mexico. And for Mexicans to say, oh, when we see you wave your flag, we feel this like goosebumps.
Why?
And because they just feel it as well, because we've
So they identify with us?
yeah, at certain
With the
points,
struggle,
yeah.
I guess, in terms of.
With the struggle, and I think Mexico, their issues are also some of the issues that are being faced also in Philippines. Like for instance, we are a nation of many nations. We're 7,500 islands. If you include the diaspora, this is also a big island that's connected in there, because we're all here right now. But the farther we are, the more disconnected we are. But yet in Mexico, for instance, in that one state where Acapulco is, for instance, state of Guerrero, in that state alone, they have as many as 150 different languages, indigenous languages, and many different peoples, and they're still trying to manage that, right? Of course, there's going to be divides there too, because you have your indigenous, and then you have the colonizers, which are the French, the Spanish, the Americans, and then you have all that history in there. So it's very loaded too. But at the same time, there's so many things that one can learn from that perspective, and then compare it to Philippines, and then seeing, okay, well, what's so different about us Filipinos being here? And the only difference is really distance.
It's just distance. Yeah.
It's interesting when you say that you represent Filipinos, and there's almost like a sense of pride when you go to a different country. And the same thing, what you do with the work that you do as a chef or being a host, that you represent. So the question then is, what are you representing then?
See, I've always thought of that. So it's like every time the Olympics comes around, right? And then if I was an athlete, what country would I represent? Right.
Oh,
so,
there you go.
So that's that. So then, and then years later, and then I have an opportunity to go to like the Culinary Olympics. So again, the question comes up again: which country would you represent? Now, I always see it as like, okay, you know what? Canada and North America is already on a plateau in the world. So I would like to represent the underdog. In my sense, that would be the Philippines, because we don't culinarily, I don't think we get the same amount of respect that other countries get, right? Even though ours is as rich and as diverse as everybody else. So then that's where it's like, but then you're not really being true to being Canadian. Actually, I am, because Canada allows me to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
They're like,
I was gonna say, like, who would tell you something like that?
Well, in culinary school, like there are a few knows, but
Got it.
but it's like, but that's what being Canadian is you're allowed to be like you could be of German birth.
Like,
or,
we're all Canadians.
We're all
so
Canadians.
Yeah.
That's the commonality.
Yeah, if
But
I
what
win the
else is
gold,
there?
where am I going to bring it? To the Philippines? No, it's going to come back to Canada, but with a Philippine flag on it. But it's more like I'm proud of my background and my culture, but I am very, very thankful to the country that gave me the opportunity to show my culture, to show my my background.
I agree with that too.
It's very interesting. You talk to an immigrant and they have so much love for the country. You talk to a Canadian, they're saying like, "Oh, we're not the U.S. Like we're kind of like so passive."
That's
but
because they haven't traveled.
and is that also as an immigrant we have the edge to say that we have traveled, we have struggled, and know what we need to be grateful about,
Of course,
right?
It's like you can't you can't know how good you really are until you fail, right? So how can you base it on like you've never traveled, you speak one language, and then you're saying the country that you're at sucks? You have nothing to compare to because you're so one-dimensional.
Yeah.
But as an immigrant, we came from strife. We came from problems. We are bilingual.
Yes. I think even that alone, just the bilingual part, is for me. I value that a lot because if I didn't speak Tagalog and English at the same time, I don't know how quick I would be to learn all the other languages to the point that I speak them every day. So, and putting it back into context of Toronto, like I lived in so many cities. In Toronto, sometimes like Toronto is supposed to be one of the most multicultural countries.
Yes.
But when you look at their second generation, they only speak one language. How can that be in a
If you hang out with that crew.
Yeah, like
But then if you go with the Filipino crew, they don't even speak English that much. It's like
but at least they can speak both, right? And then
Like they have
you look at-
languages,
You look at
like,
other cultures,
yeah.
like anyone that's from Latin America, for instance, or some Europeans. I think they value the bilingualism. I mean, you see reports there that being bilingual, trilingual, it helps.
There's more opportunities.
It helps
Yeah, it's
more
like an
opportunities
advantage, yeah.
From a health perspective, your brain.
Oh, really?
Yeah. At the same time, you have every single language that you speak. You also have a different personality. Sometimes it might not be the same because the words that you use are not saying it's not English, and that's why sometimes I get bored of English because they're in Spanish and Portuguese, the way you say something, it's like something
It's so
more
kind of like different.
and that's why I fell in love with Tagalog again. It's funny enough that the reason why I started falling in love with Tagalog is from a hip hop.
Okay,
show.
you know what? I love when you're saying falling in love in Tagalog. And I think a lot of like youth can relate to that. And we're actually gonna go back and figure out what is that all about. And I wanted to know from that language, are we proud to be Filipinos, especially if you're asking a youth? So please stay tuned.
Welcome to your new home in the sky. Philippine Airlines. Fly high with transparent and affordable all-in fares year-round. Feel at home anywhere you go. Philippine Airlines.
Your home in the sky.
Sa pagdiriwang ng ikalawang dekadang pamamayagpag sa bansa bilang pinakamabentang sasakyan, Action Honda, Canada's best-selling car. Aming pinakikilala ang bagong Civic SE with new lower down payment. 2018 Civic LX Sedan or step up to new 2018 Civic SE. All new 2018 Accord LX and 2018 CRV LX. The car you trusted, the car you know. Gives you the latest models, the features you love. Brand new car. Zero down payment, zero security deposit. Need I say more? 416-281-1234. Come see Paeng Yepes at 4334 Kingston Road. Kabayan, let's make it happen. Action Honda, Honda for all. For the first time ever on a Toronto stage, Cheeky Crown Media, in association with Stayman Estates and MCBN Media Group, cooperation with Black Diamond Event Management, present Diva to Diva. Diva to Diva. It's a clash of world-class Pinoy talents, the goddesses of music, back to back with the queens of the night. Diva to Diva. Cool Ledesma, Shasha Padilla, Mitch Valdez, Nanette Inventor. An evening of laughter and sighs, of ageless beauties and voices, and of fun moments and punchlines. It's a showdown of performances. Diva to Diva Toronto, September 22nd at the Toronto Pavilion.
Good day! iRemit lets you send money online anytime and anywhere you are with just a few clicks. Welcome to iRemit X, your online gateway to send money to your family. Send money within minutes with iRemit X.
This program is brought to you by iRemit. Sa iRemit, may ngiti sa bawat padala.
We were talking about like falling in love.
Yes. Oh, here we go.
We went to a different topic earlier. I said, no, that's a different show. Okay, about language. And then I have another question that actually would summarize about what we're talking about. It's so interesting, though. It went to a different direction, more than what I'm hoping for.
Okay.
And I think in a way, there's so much more that we need to be aware of. It can't contain in 1 hour. And it's really about connecting with the youth. And I feel so disconnected in a way that I don't know what I need to give them to help them. Do they need help anyway? So that's...
See, I think because the youth, like saying youth itself, it's like youth to me means like you're a kid, you're immature, you're still learning. When you come to that age, you will search for it. Like nobody's gonna spoon feed you that. You're gonna look for it yourself. Like I always use the analogy of like if somebody's like a hardcore drug addict, okay. You can say, don't do drugs, don't do this, don't do that, all you want. But because they're so addicted, they're at that phase, they won't listen to you. But if you allow them to hit rock bottom, they will search for their own meaning and like, purpose, hey, you know what? I think I need to change.
So let it run its course.
Yes.
Because they're gonna arrive to how they're gonna arrive. They're gonna arrive there anyways.
Yes.
So in a way, tell us old people like hold your horses, really.
It depends on again like the whole definition of youth. Because for me, when it comes to youth, that could be up to 40.
That's right.
In mentality, what we're talking about.
That being a youth, especially like youth leadership, youth driven, doesn't mean that it's only between 18 to 25, because everyone has a different trajectory as well. So and for me, I think in Toronto, I definitely whenever I come back here, most of my friends, or maybe it's just me making myself feel this way, but they do make me feel my age. That like at turning 39 at the end of later this year, and it's like you're telling me what a 39-year-old should feel like or be like.
It's almost the same thing. You're questioning,
so
like at this stage. You're right.
You don't have that right.
It's like, hold on. You're 39, so you should be. This is how you're supposed to dress. This is how you're supposed to act.
Exactly.
And sign here, please.
Well, here's the other thing, though. The other perspective would be that for parents or for those really like interest to really help them, and pave the way for them. It's like, what did I miss if something went wrong? Or I should have done something more. I should have like guided them some more. It's almost like there's a guilt in that at the same time when I'm going to allow them to be them, and when at the same time I could pull back to say that I have done my best or have I really not done enough? So that's for parents' sake, that's itself, or the community who is very involved. Like, have we really done enough for our youth? And at the same time, the youth saying like, let us be. We're gonna get there.
Whew, I just thought of something about like how okay, so every year we have 100 events, which I'm very fortunate to be hosting some of them. Please keep them coming.
How many festivals do we gonna
Exactly.
have?
That's another. That's for another
Is that a
show.
different Filipino and then that Filipino? But anyhow.
I wish the events would be like northern, south Philippines. and all
Oh,
that stuff.
interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
But
Exactly.
again, it's
Step by step.
step by
right?
step, right?
By step.
But I think it's like, are we doing these festivals to showcase our culture to Canadians, or are we doing that to make Filipinos here feel more comfortable and a reminder of where they came from? You know what I mean? It's like if you're a caregiver that just came here, like, and you're feeling the loneliness and stuff because you're the only one here, and in these events. Give you the sense of the Filipino community that you had in the Philippines. Are we doing it for that person, or are we doing it for the person who's looking for their Filipino identity?
What's your take?
I think it's
To showcase?
no. I
To
actually
be
think it's
for-
to make the Filipinos that are here feeling lonely because they're new here. They've been here less than 10 years, and they long
Interesting. Yeah.
for the
I think
Filipino
so as
culture.
well. I mean, for me, this is my first summer that I went to. I think I did the whole
You went to
thing.
everyone.
Mabuhay Festival, Taste of Manila, even did Canada's Wonderland, Taste of Asia. So, but we were the only group that was showcased in that afternoon. But what I felt about it, this is my first time going to Little Manila, and
Bathurst and Wilson, really?
yeah, and
so that's a
and
feeling.
I had such a great time.
Yeah.
If I did this maybe 10 years ago, maybe I probably wouldn't have had the same desire. I don't know why.
Oh, it's
Is it because of age now that
fun,
because you're seeking and then you're
because
like it's
because stepping away from these pressures, being in Toronto, allowed me to come back and say, the state of Filipino Canadians in Toronto is actually pretty good.
Yes.
It's grown so much more. There's a lot more collaborations. I always pair gastronomy and performing arts. For Filipinos, it's our form of diplomacy. So that's something that we can always share, not just locally, it's globally as well.
Yeah.
So when you get to go to those culinary Olympics, I wanted to find out more about this. I feel it's also the same as what we do when we go every single year that we go to tours, right? Because imagine like second generation, and that's what I tell. I think this was the message this year in that sense. Now that we're recruiting for Bulgaria next year, Bulgaria we've been there before. It's really organized, but it's easier for us to reach out to second generations and say, we're not asking you to join our group. We're asking you to join this tour through performing arts so that you can learn about your origin. And the thing is that it's not like they're learning about dance that has no connections anymore. Everything that we do right now is even more important, right? Because the very same people, the very same dancers whose culture bearers are back in the Philippines, they still exist. They're alive and well. They're connected, and it's different now that before, like maybe 30 years ago when the group used to perform, because they can't compare anything else. You don't have any YouTube.
Yeah.
But nowadays it's like we're asking ourselves when we're performing this: is it are we getting the blessing of them? Are we doing this correctly? Is this authentic? So these are the questions from a folk dance perspective. That these are the questions that we need to ask ourselves, because these are the very same things that we want to approach second generation.
And how-
do we
yeah.
sorry, but do we get the attention from
That's-
back home to
Oh.
here?
Well, that's the reason why I went back home last year, because I
Squeaky wheel.
No, I just my message was when I went to NCCA, so National Culture of Arts, National Commission of Culture and Arts. I told them, I go, what we do here, so ourselves, Fiesta Filipina Dance Troupe, Culture Philippines, all the other groups in Canada, for instance, that exist. What we do is pretty much the same as all the groups in Manila and Davao. So so do you not should you not or sorry should you also recognize us as groups, part of the diaspora, part of we're not essentially
But
part of Philippines.
yeah, but do they? Do they though?
I think that's the it. Yes and no.
Okay. Oh,
Yes and no.
What's the no?
The no part is for example last year for Mabuhay Festival, NCCA had commissioned two groups, one from Davao, one from Manila, and they were great, right? They should those groups should come on a yearly basis to teach us or to teach or to do workshops. So it's a yes and no because I think no one really asked them that question until I came and kind of just said, hey, we've existed for 44 years. Bainihan, the oldest national folk dance group of Philippines, is only 65. Fiesta Filipina dance troupe here is 53. We are 45. So we've been around too, right?
Yeah.
The group's been around. But yet we're not being recognized. Or I'm not saying that we're not. I'm just saying that maybe they just didn't know that we existed. And
It's the
that's a
same thing with
different story.
food. It's the same thing with culinary at this time, like because there's so many Filipinos who love to cook, but they can't be chef. They can't be all of them chef.
what do you mean they can't be chefs?
Like for example, like when you go to those culinary Olympics, like what are you representing, and also like is there kind of like a competition, or you come together as representative Filipino? But
Do you have you have to be in a certain prestige, like
Yeah.
coming from a specific school? Or,
Not
or how,
really.
how does
more
one get in
reputation.
front? More reputation.
It's more of by invite.
so not really.
okay.
Yeah. So like,
it's great,
does
too,
it
though.
really mean like based on your merits?
Yes.
Yeah.
You
Yes
know,
and no.
yes and no.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it's more about like with anything in this world. It's more about who you know than what you know. You could be the most talented guy, but if nobody like
can't market
if you can't market yourself, then you're not gonna get anywhere. But so it's the same thing. But it's sorry, what was your question? No.
No, so here's the question then, because like we're at the
Can everyone
end,
be chefs?
at the end, like what are you gonna tell the youth of today? What advice that you're gonna tell them, whether they should be just living their life and let them be, or and you live that life. You're here right now, established, successful, still thriving, but there's so much more. So what can you say to them at this
You
point?
wanna take this one first?
I can sure. I can only base my advice based on the experience that I had. So I championed Folklorico Filipino Canada because of the opportunities that it provided me. So I have yet to see. I'm seeing a few going through our program in most recently, but at the same time, how did I know just by joining a Filipino folk dance group here that it would open doors for me, that I'd be away from Canada for 16 years, whether that's academic or that's professional or personal goals. The intent, or sorry, the reason why I left was because of Filipino folk dance, of all the things, right? And so yeah, that's my only advice is that for me, by looking back to my origins, it allowed me to really understand what I want to be as a Filipino and as a Canadian.
But that's by your own choice.
That's
your own
by
merit,
that's
right?
by my own merit, my own choice, with a good support system, and also maybe not such a good support system, because I'm a type of person, when you tell me no, I'll make sure that it's a yes.
Yeah.
Is that a Filipino?
I don't know.
Like when you say no, it's like you still move forward.
I think so. I
Yeah.
think so as well.
Yeah.
That that's one of the worst things that you could tell me, is not to do something, because I'm gonna prove to myself that, especially if it's something of worth, I'm gonna prove to myself that, well, what makes your experience better than the one I'm just about to have? Why should I take your advice? And that's why, like, for me, I will take advice from someone that has great examples, life examples, and that's the type of advice that I like to hear versus any just third party information. Oh, but they do this, or
Yeah,
they do that.
yeah.
To inspire.
So
Oh, so and so's kid is
Yeah.
blah blah blah. I was like,
Yeah.
okay, good for them, but
benchmarking and
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
those.
Benchmarking, yes.
Benchmarking.
It's the same thing with you?
Did my parents want me to go into culinary? Not their first choice, but that
So
didn't-
what, like from that learning,
youth-
what would you tell to
What
the
would
youth of today?
It's the same thing. It's like it's a journey. You gotta
Yeah.
you'll find out when you want. It'll just hit you. But when it does hit you, just make sure you don't waste your time, and actually fulfill it to the highest potential.
Yeah.
Like if that's what you're gonna get into, use everything of you to be part of that. Because if not, it's just wasted anyway. So
Yeah.
because you're wasting your time, you could have tried something else.
Yeah, yeah.
Right?
We are run out of time. But what
More coffee, please.
that's right. What we want for you, and I learn a lot, and I think I've come to a perspective of being a parent. Being a parent is like I had my own journey, and as a parent, you have your own journey. And this is the time for the youth of today, and I know you guys are watching, that make your own journey, make your own story, make mistakes, be adventurous. You're adaptive, especially we're blessed, you being a Filipino, being a Canadian, whether you're biracial, second generation, first wave, second wave, I don't know, it's probably a tornado, but you are relevant, and make a choice every day that you are. And I think that's I only ask as a parent. So hopefully you'll join us again next week.
MCBN. Connecting our world.